72 hours to decide. The Korean Mafia boss's choice between blood and love. Seo-jun stood in his operations room overlooking the southern ports, surrounded by surveillance monitors, encrypted phones, and the faces of men who'd followed him through 2 decades of calculated violence. Woo-suk, his lieutenant, sharp, loyal, terrified. 5 of his most trusted captains, men who'd never questioned an order. And on the video screen, June calling from the National Assembly building, her expression carved from marble. "You've started something you can't finish," she said without greeting. "They started it when they took Adeyemi." "Your weakness," she corrected, venom in every syllable. "The Nigerian fixer you hid from everyone. The family you've been protecting in secret for 3 years. Every syndicate in Korea knows about them now. They know the great Seo-jun Kang bleeds. I never claimed I didn't." June leaned forward, diamonds glittering at her throat. "You married me for political cover. That was the arrangement. Your underworld empire for my family's legitimacy. And now you've destroyed everything by admitting you care about them." "I admitted nothing. They leaked it. The Baekho Syndicate didn't just kidnap Adeyemi," June continued coldly. "They exposed your weakness. Every rival, every hungry lieutenant, every 2-bit gang in Busan is watching to see what you'll do. And my father's consortium? They're withdrawing support. They say you're compromised, unstable, a liability." "Good. I don't need politicians." "You need someone," she snapped. "The Baekho Syndicate has Adeyemi. They've put Amara Okafor and her children on display. You have 72 hours to surrender your territory and your reputation, or they start sending pieces." "Then we move tonight." Woo-suk cleared his throat. "Boss, she's not wrong. We've got maybe 20 men we can truly trust. Baekho has over 100 soldiers, plus every mercenary the bounty will attract." "Then we don't fight fair," Seo-jun said quietly, turning to the maps spread across the table. "The abandoned customs warehouse near Busan. That's where they're holding Adeyemi." "Intel confirms it," Woo-suk replied. "But they've fortified since the photo leak. Guards on every entrance, snipers positioned on the rooftops. No way in without a full assault. So we give them one." The room went silent. Ji-yoon's voice crackled through the speaker, sharp with disbelief. "You're insane. A direct assault on a fortified position with 100 armed men? That's suicide." "No, it's a distraction." Seo-jun's finger traced a line on the blueprint. "We hit them from the front. Loud. Explosive. Make them think we're storming the building. While they're focused on the main force, you go in through the storm drains." Woo-suk finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Like the Gwangju operation. Exactly like Gwangju. Only this time, I'm not just extracting a hostage. I'm ending this." One of his captains spoke carefully. "Boss, even if we breach, getting out alive is optional," Seo-jun interrupted, his voice still as winter. "I'm not asking anyone to follow me into this. It's a suicide mission. I know that. But Adeyemi is in there because of me, and I'm bringing him out." He looked around the room. "Anyone who wants to leave, do it now. Noscham. No consecuencias." Nobody moved. Woo-suk smiled grimly. "We've followed you for 20 years, boss. Might as well see it through." The others nodded. Seo-jun felt something shift in his chest. Loyalty, brotherhood. The bonds his father said only blood could forge. Maybe the old man was right about one thing. "We move at dawn," Seo-jun said. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we cut the head off the snake." The captains filed out, leaving Seo-jun alone with Ji-yoon's image flickering on screen. "You're really doing this," she said quietly. "Yes. You'll probably die. Probably. And the woman? The children? What happens to them when you're dead and Baekho comes for revenge?" That stopped him, because she was right. Even if he eliminated Baekho's leadership, the organization would survive. Splinter. Multiply. And they'd hunt Amara and her children until there was nothing left to find. Unless, "What if I gave you something?" Seo-jun said slowly. Ji-yoon's eyes narrowed. "What could you possibly give me that I want?" Baekho's entire operation. Territory, smuggling routes, political connections. Everything. You wanted to consolidate Seoul's underground through legitimate channels. Take Busan too. Expand your father's influence across the entire southern corridor. All of it, he continued, in exchange for one thing. What thing? Protection for Amara Okafor and her 3 daughters.
Permanent.
Absolute. They become untouchable. Any family that threatens them answers to you. They live quiet lives, safe, anonymous, and you become the most powerful political family in Korea. Silence stretched like a knife blade. You'd give me an entire city, Ji-yoon said finally, to protect your bastard family? Yes. Why should I believe you'd honor this deal? Because I'll be dead, Seo-jun replied. This isn't a negotiation. It's a will. My final act. I give you Busan. You give them safety. That's the deal. Ji-yoon was quiet for a long moment, her calculating mind working through angles, leverage, risk. If I agree, she said finally, her voice like silk over steel, you can never contact them again. No visits. No letters. No shadow protection from afar. You disappear completely. Do we have an understanding? Seo-jun closed his eyes. Thought of Zuri's laugh. Amara's worried smile. The life they'd built in the cracks between his violence. We have an understanding. Then do what you do best, Seo-jun, Ji-yoon said. And try not to die before you sign the papers. The screen went dark. Seo-jun stood alone in the operations room, watching the sun rise over the ports he'd ruled for 20 years. In 48 hours, he'd either be dead or disappearing forever. But the children would be safe. And somehow that was enough. For 20 years, Seo-jun Kang ruled the southern ports of Korea with precision, silence, and fear. He wasn't loud like other bosses. He didn't torture for pleasure or kill for pride. He believed chaos was bad for business. And business was everything. Until the night it wasn't. The call came at 2:14 a.m. Boss, Woo-suk said, voice shaking. They took him. Seo-jun didn't ask who. He already knew. Adeyemi Okafor, the Nigerian fixer who'd saved Seo-jun's life years ago, the only outsider allowed into his inner circle, had vanished somewhere between Incheon port and the airport. No ransom demand. No message. Just silence. That silence meant one thing. Va. By sunrise, Seoul's underworld was buzzing. The leak spread like poison through encrypted channels, back-alley meetings, smoke-filled rooms where men traded secrets like currency. Seo-jun Kang, the Ice King who never showed weakness, had a soft spot. Family. Not even his own. An African woman. 3 children. Protected in the shadows for years. The smaller factions watched with predator eyes, recalculating odds, measuring distances, waiting to see if the great Seo-jun would bleed. In the operations room, Woo-suk spread intelligence reports across the table like autopsy photos. The Baekho Syndicate leaked it everywhere, he said quietly. Every lieutenant, every mid-level boss from Busan to Seoul knows about Amara Okafor and the children. They're making you choose. Choose what? Seo-jun's voice was flat. Your territory routes. Every smuggling pipeline we've built for 15 years. They want the encrypted ledgers, the political contacts, the port schedules. Woo-suk paused. And they want your name. My name. They want you exposed. A king without shadows. Every deal you've brokered, every official you've bought, every secret you've buried on record. Public. Prosecutable.
Seo-jun left once.
Short. Bitter. They want my blood. They want you powerless. Woo-suk corrected. Dead is easy. This is worse. The video screen flickered to life. Ji-yoon appeared, calling from her office in the National Assembly. Behind her, floor-to-ceiling windows framed Seoul's skyline like a throne room. She wore white, always white, as if purity could be purchased with tailoring. You promised me, she said without preamble, that love would never interfere with power. I promised I wouldn't be reckless. You hit a family, she snapped, leaning forward. Not yours worse. An African woman and children. If the assembly finds out you've been protecting foreign nationals with ties to international smuggling, you're finished. And so am I. They're innocent. Ji-yoon's eyes went cold as contract law. Innocence doesn't survive this world. Seo-jun, you taught me that. Every asset is leverage. Every weakness is a weapon. You built an empire on that principle, and now you're bleeding because you forgot it. I didn't forget anything. Then why are they still alive? Her voice cut like surgical steel. You've eliminated threats for less. Witnesses, informants, anyone who knew too much. But a woman and 3 children who know exactly who you are, what you do, where your vulnerabilities lie. You let them live. Worse, you protected them. Seo-jun said nothing. The consortium is already pulling support, Ji-yoon continued. My father called this morning. Half the assembly thinks you're compromised. The other half thinks you're going soft. Either way, you're a liability. What do you want me to do? Choose, she said simply. Your empire or your conscience. Because you can't have both anymore. Everyone's watching. She ended the call. The screen went black. Seo-jun stood alone, staring at the photo on his phone. Amara pushing a stroller through the airport terminal. 3 toddlers with dark curls and wide eyes, looking at the world like it might be safe. For 20 years, he'd justified every violent act, every elimination, every calculated cruelty. He'd told himself it was necessary. Business. Survival. But this was the first time his violence threatened children. His hands. Their blood. Woo-suk's voice came softly from the doorway. Boss. Seo-jun looked up. Seoul's watching, Woo-suk said. Every faction. Every rival. They're waiting to see if you break. Seo-jun stared at the photo again. His empire had a crack. And everyone could see it bleeding. Seo-jun couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony overlooking the ports, watching container ships drift through pre-dawn fog like ghosts. Behind him, the operations room hummed with encrypted chatter and surveillance feeds. But all he could see was blood. Macau. 7 years ago. Flashback. The casino ambush had been perfect. Too perfect. 3 rival bosses, 1 neutral meeting, and Seo-jun walking into a kill box disguised as diplomacy. He'd barely made it to the service corridor before the bullets started flying. 2 of his guards died instantly. The third took a round meant for Seo-jun's skull. He remembered stumbling through the kitchen, blood soaking through his suit, vision blurring. The exit blocked. Enemies closing in. Then a door opened. A tall Nigerian man in a dealer's uniform, calm as Sunday morning. This way, he'd said in perfect Korean. Seo-jun had no reason to trust him. Every reason not to. But the man's eyes held something Seo-jun recognized. The quiet resignation of someone who'd already decided to risk everything. The man, Adeyemi Okafor, led him through service tunnels, past security checkpoints, into a loading dock where a delivery truck waited. Why? Seo-jun had asked, pressing gauze to his bleeding shoulder. Because powerful men forget the people who saved them, Adeyemi replied, starting the engine. But decent men don't. He'd driven Seo-jun to a private clinic. Waited. Asked for nothing. 3 days later, Seo-jun asked him, What do you want? A life my daughter can be proud of, Adeyemi said simply. Seo-jun hired him the next morning. Not as muscle. Not as a lieutenant. As the fixer who moved between worlds, legal and illegal, east and west, violence and diplomacy, with the kind of grace Seo-jun's brutality could never achieve. For 7 years, Adeyemi Okafor had been the invisible hand that kept Seo-jun's empire running smoothly, and Seo-jun had rewarded that loyalty by dragging him into hell. Present. Boss. Woo-suk's voice pulled Seo-jun back to the balcony. Intel confirmed the location. Abandoned customs warehouse, Pier 17, Busan. Baekho leadership is inside. Adeyemi's alive, but barely.
Seo-jun turned.
How many guards? 50, maybe 60. Rotating shifts. Snipers on the roof. They're not hiding. They want us to know where he is. Because it's bait. Exactly. Woo-suk pulled up thermal imaging on his tablet. They're daring you to come. A rescue operation gets messy, puts Adeyemi in the crossfire. Negotiation gives them time to bleed you dry, demand after demand. What about a trade? For what? They already have what they want, leverage. Every hour Adeyemi's in there, your reputation bleeds. Every minute you hesitate, smaller factions start wondering if the great Seo-jun Kang is finally breakable. Seo-jun studied the thermal feeds. Bodies clustered in the main floor. Adeyemi's heat signature alone in the basement, barely moving. They're not bargaining, Seo-jun said quietly. They're hunting. They leaked Amara and the children to expose weakness. They took Adeyemi to prove it. So what do we do? Seo-jun was silent for a long moment. He thought about Adeyemi in that Macau corridor, opening a door when he didn't have to, risking everything for a stranger because it was right. He thought about Amara, trusting Seo-jun to protect her family even though she knew exactly what kind of man he was. He thought about 3 children who'd never chosen this world but would die in it anyway if he chose wrong. We don't rescue him, Seo-jun said. Woo-suk went still. We end them. Every Baekho leader in that warehouse. Every pipeline they control. Every lie they've built their empire on. Seo-jun's voice was cold, surgical. We don't negotiate with predators. We remove them. And if Adeyemi dies in the assault? Seo-jun closed his eyes. Then I'll carry that weight for the rest of my life. He turned back to the city, watching dawn break over Seoul's skyline. But I won't let them use him as bait forever. And I won't let them hunt children for sport. Woo-suk nodded slowly. When do we move? 48 hours, Seo-jun replied. I need time to plan something they won't see coming. And if they kill him before then?
Seo-jun의 Zeitend.
Then I'll burn Busan to the ground. He looked at Woo-suk, and his lieutenant saw something rare in those eyes. Not rage, not calculation, something quieter, colder, certainty. Get everyone ready, Seo-jun said. I'm ending this my way. The operations room felt smaller at midnight. Woo-suk spread satellite imagery across the table, thermal scans, guard rotations, structural blueprints of the Busan warehouse. 6 of Seo-jun's captains stood in silence, studying the death trap like surgeons examining a terminal patient. Adeyemi's in the basement, Woo-suk said, pointing to a dim heat signature. Vitals are weak but steady. They're keeping him alive deliberately. Changmin,
Seo-jun asked.
Confirmed on site. Baekho's entire leadership council, 8 executives, maybe 40 soldiers. They're not even hiding. It's a fortress and a stage. One of the captains spoke up. We could hit the perimeter with incendiaries, force an evacuation, extract during the chaos. They'd execute him the moment the first grenade lands. Woo-suk interrupted. Changmin's not stupid. He knows we're coming. Negotiation, then, another captain offered. Buy time. Wear them down. They don't want time, Seo-jun said quietly. They want theater. Every hour we negotiate, every concession we make, the underworld watches me bleed. Woo-suk pulled up 3 tactical scenarios. Frontal assault, stealth extraction, prisoner exchange. Each one color-coded with casualty estimates. Red, red, red. Any of these work, Woo-suk said carefully. But Adeyemi's survival rate is under 30%, and our losses would be catastrophic. Seo-jun studied the blueprints in silence. Then he said the unthinkable. We're not rescuing him. The room froze. Someone's breath caught. The captain shifted uncomfortably. Woo-suk's eyes went wide. Boss, we're burning the syndicate, Seo-jun continued, his voice surgical. Every leader, every ledger, every asset they've built for 20 years. We turn that warehouse into a graveyard. And Adeyemi? Woo-suk's voice was barely a whisper.
Seo-jun의 Zeitend.
If they think I care more about one man than my empire, they'll kill him anyway. Slowly, publicly. They'll make an example that destroys us both. Horror rippled through the room. You'd let him die? One captain asked, disbelief choking his words. I'd make his death mean something, Seo-jun replied coldly. Mercy is weakness. They're betting I'll break. that I'll storm in like a fool and walk into their ambush. But power demands fear, and fear demands sacrifice. He looked around the room. Adeyemi knew the risks when he entered this world. We all did. If I rescue him and lose 50 men doing it, Baekho wins. If I negotiate and surrender territory, they'll come for the children next. But if I eliminate their entire command structure, if I show Seoul that threatening me costs everything, then his death protects everyone he loved. The logic was flawless. The morality was monstrous. Woo-suk stared at his boss like he was seeing a stranger. Prepare the assault, Seo-jun said. We move at dawn. The captains filed out, silent as pallbearers. That night, Seo-jun stood alone on his penthouse balcony, watching Seoul's lights blur through the glass barrier between him and the city he controlled. Behind him, a door opened. He didn't turn. You're not supposed to be here, he said quietly. I followed the surveillance gaps, Amara Okafor replied, stepping onto the balcony. You're running out of time.
Seo-jun turned.
She wore simple clothes, jeans, a jacket, but carried herself with the kind of exhausted dignity that comes from surviving things that should break people. Her eyes were red but dry. How did you? I know what kind of man you are, she interrupted. I've always known. You think I didn't understand what protection meant? What favors you called in to keep my children safe? Seo-jun said nothing. Adeyemi told me, she continued, voice steady, about Macau, about how you gave him work when no one else would, how you kept us hidden when your enemies could have used us. She stepped closer. He said you were the most dangerous man he'd ever met, and the most loyal. Loyalty has limits, does it? Her voice sharpened. Because from where I'm standing, you're about to prove him wrong. Seo-jun's hands tightened on the railing. If I save him, he said slowly, they'll come for you next. For Zuri. For all of you. This isn't about one man, it's about showing strength. If I appear weak, you become targets forever. And if you let him die to prove you're strong? Amara asked. What does that make you? Alive. And able to protect you.
No.
She shook her head. It makes you exactly what they are. My children already lost one father to violence in Lagos. I won't let them lose another man they depend on because he chose fear over humanity. This isn't fear. It's terror, she interrupted, her voice breaking finally. You're terrified that caring about us makes you weak. So you're going to sacrifice my husband to prove you're still a monster worth fearing. Seo-jun turned away. I don't know how to protect you without disappearing, he whispered. Amara stepped beside him, looking out at the city. Then don't disappear, she said softly. Choose something better. Choose the man Adeyemi believed in. The one who opened a door when he didn't have to. Seo-jun closed his eyes. He'd built an empire on calculated violence. Every decision measured in blood and profit. Every weakness eliminated before it could metastasize. But standing here, with a woman who'd trusted him with her children's lives, he realized something that made his chest feel hollow. Violence couldn't solve this, and he knew nothing else. I don't have another answer, he admitted. Then find one, Amara said. You have 48 hours. She walked back inside, leaving Seo-jun alone with the city and his certainty crumbling like ash in his hands. Seo-jun didn't return to the operations room. He sat in the dark corner of his penthouse library, surrounded by books he'd never read, in a home that had never felt like one. The whiskey in his glass had gone warm an hour ago. Outside, Seoul slept. Inside, Seo-jun remembered why he'd stopped believing in love 20 years ago. The marriage. June had been a transaction from the beginning. Her father controlled half the National Assembly. Seo-jun controlled the ports. The marriage was a merger dressed in white silk and political theater. His underworld empire. Legitimized through her family's connections. Her family's ambitions funded through his invisible cash flows. They'd stood at the altar like corporate executives signing contracts.
No illusions. No worms.
Just power recognizing power. Do you love me? She'd asked once, years into their arrangement, during a rare moment of vulnerability over late-night paperwork. I respect you, Seo-jun had replied honestly. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She'd nodded, filing the conversation away like every other negotiation. They'd never spoken of love again. Their marriage worked because neither expected anything beyond utility. She gave him political cover. He gave her resources. They coexisted in separate wings of the same cold palace, partners in ambition, strangers in everything else. It had been sustainable, until Amara. The difference: Amara hadn't asked for his empire, hadn't needed his connections, his money, his carefully constructed facade of respectability. She'd looked at him across a hospital waiting room 3 years ago, when Adeyemi had been injured during a botched negotiation, and seen something Seo-jun thought he'd buried completely. A man, not a king. Tired, guilty, human. You blame yourself, she'd said simply. I brought him into this world. He chose to follow you, she'd corrected. That's different than being dragged. In that moment, Seo-jun had felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood. The dangerous sensation of being known, not feared, not obeyed, not politically maneuvered around, just seen. He'd helped them quietly after that, ensured the children had safe schools, made certain Amara's nursing credentials transferred without bureaucratic nightmare, eliminated threats before they materialized, never asking for gratitude, never expecting recognition, just protecting something fragile in a world built for breaking things. And that had been his mistake. Love wasn't protection. Love was liability. The escalation. Seo-jun's phone buzzed at 3:47 a.m. A photo. No message. Zuri's school. Empty playground. A single red balloon tied to the swing set. His blood went cold. Another photo arrived 30 seconds later. The grocery store Amara used. A man in a black jacket standing near the produce section, face obscured, watching. Then a third. The pharmacy where she picked up prescriptions. The bus stop the children used. The park where they fed ducks on weekends. Baekho wasn't hiding anymore. They were demonstrating. We can reach them. Anytime. Anywhere. Seo-jun's hands shook. Not with fear, but with the kind of rage that precedes annihilation. Woo-suk appeared in the doorway, tablet glowing. They're not making moves yet, he said carefully. Just watching. Letting you know they're watching. How many tails? For rotating teams. Professional. They're not trying to hide. They want you to feel hunted.
Seo-jun stood, jaw tight.
Pull our people back from the surveillance counter. Let Baekho think they're winning. Boss. If they see us protecting the family directly, they'll escalate. Right now they're posturing. I need them confident. Woo-suk hesitated. And if they move on the children before we can, they won't. Seo-jun's voice was certain. They're leveraging fear. Dead hostages lose value. But terrified ones. He exhaled slowly. Terrified ones make men do stupid things. He walked to the window, watching dawn break over the city. How long until the assault? 32 hours. Make it 24. The nightmare. Seo-jun finally slept near sunrise, and dreamed in blood. He saw Zuri running through a warehouse, calling for help in Korean and Yoruba, her voice echoing off concrete walls. Saw Amara shielding the other children, eyes wide with betrayal. Saw Adeyemi hanging from chains, whispering, "You promised." Saw Chongmin standing over them all, smiling. You can't save everyone, Seo-jun. Kings don't have families. They have weaknesses. The gunshot echoed. Seo-jun woke gasping, sweat-soaked, alone in sheets that felt like burial shrouds. He sat up slowly, hands trembling. Outside, Seoul hummed with morning traffic, oblivious to the war unfolding in its shadows. Seo-jun looked at his phone. The photos from Baekho still glowed on the screen. The playground, the grocery store, the pharmacy, every place where innocence still existed. And he understood with brutal clarity. His power couldn't protect them. His reputation couldn't shield them. His violence couldn't save them. Because he was the danger. His name, his empire, his proximity to their lives. As long as Seo-jun Kang existed in their orbit, they would never be safe. Enemies would hunt them to hurt him. Rivals would threaten them to control him. His very existence painted targets on their backs that no amount of security could erase. June had been right. Love was weakness, but not because it made him vulnerable, because it made them vulnerable. Seo-jun stood slowly, walked to the window, and watched the city wake up to a day that would never touch the darkness he carried. He whispered to his reflection, to the ghost of the man he might have been, "If I stay, they die." The decision crystallized in his chest like ice. Cold, final, inevitable. Dawn came with violence. The explosions tore through the warehouse's eastern wing at 5:47 a.m. Deliberate, deafening, designed to wake every Baekho soldier inside. Seo-jun's assault team stormed the main entrance with automatic weapons and flash grenades, exactly as expected. Loud, visible, suicidal. Changmin would be watching from inside, smiling at the predictability. He wouldn't see Seo-jun entering through the storm drains 300 meters south. The water was chest-deep, freezing, and smelled like industrial decay. Seo-jun moved through the darkness with two men, Woo-suk and Jin, his best close-quarters fighter. Following the blueprint burned into his memory. Gunfire echoed above them. Shouts. Chaos orchestrated like a symphony. They surfaced inside the warehouse basement, water streaming off tactical gear. Adeyemi hung from chains in the center of the room, head down, breathing shallow. Seo-jun crossed the distance in 4 strides, knife already cutting through the restraints. Adeyemi's eyes opened, swollen, bloodshot, but alive. "You came," he rasped, voice broken from screaming or silence. Seo-jun couldn't tell which. "I always do." "Liar." Adeyemi coughed, blood on his lips. "You were going to let me die." Seo-jun caught him as the chains released. "I considered it. And Amara changed my mind."
Adeyemi left wet, painful, genuine.
"She's smarter than both of us. Can you walk? Can you carry me if I can't?" Seo-jun pulled Adeyemi's arm over his shoulder. "Let's not find out." They were 10 steps from the drainage tunnel when the alarm screamed. Baekho soldiers flooded the corridor, 6, 8, a dozen, weapons raised, faces hard with professional certainty. Then Changmin stepped through them, clapping slowly. He was smaller than Seo-jun expected. Precise. Expensive suit, rimless glasses, the kind of man who killed with spreadsheets before ever touching a trigger. "You chose blood," Changmin said, voice carrying over the gunfire above.
"I'm impressed."
"I thought you'd gone soft." Seo-jun lowered Adeyemi carefully, placed himself between his friend and the guns. "You miscalculated." "Did I?" Changmin smiled. "My men are already moving on the school, the grocery store, the pharmacy, every place those children touch." He pulled out his phone, showed Seo-jun a live feed. Zuri's classroom. Empty but the threat implicit. "Kill me," Changmin continued, "and my soldiers slaughter them. Cooperate and maybe, I let them live long enough for you to regret this."
Seo-jun's Jaw-zeitend.
This was the moment. The choice every gangster film promised. Beg for mercy. Negotiate. Surrender.
Instead, Seo-jun left.
Low. Cold. Final. "You're already dead," he said quietly. "You just don't know it yet." Changmin's smile faltered. Seo-jun pulled a remote detonator from his vest. "The assault upstairs?" he said. "Distraction. The negotiations?" He clicked the first switch. "Theater." Second switch. "But the explosives I've been planting in your infrastructure for 3 weeks?" Changmin's face went white. "Those are real." Seo-jun pressed the final switch. The warehouse didn't just explode. It imploded. Charges detonated in load-bearing columns, fuel lines, ammunition caches hidden throughout the building. The structure collapsed inward like a dying star, consuming everything. Soldiers, secrets, 20 years of Baekho infrastructure turning to ash and screaming metal. Seo-jun shielded Adeyemi with his body as the world became fire and thunder. Concrete rained. Steel shrieked. The ceiling folded like paper. Then silence. Dust. Smoke. The ringing in Seo-jun's ears felt like the end of the world. He pushed rubble off his back, checked Adeyemi. Breathing. Unconscious, but breathing. Woo-suk emerged from the debris, bleeding from his temple but alive. Jean didn't. Above them, dawn light filtered through the collapsed roof. Seo-jun stood slowly, surveying the graveyard he'd built. Baekho leadership gone. Changmin buried under tons of concrete. The syndicate that had ruled Busan for a generation, reduced to smoke and memory. He'd won. Destroyed his enemies completely. Proven his power absolute. But standing in the ruins, covered in ash and his soldiers' blood, Seo-jun felt no triumph. Only the hollow certainty that violence had solved nothing. The children were still targets. Amara was still vulnerable. And he was still the danger they couldn't escape. Woo-suk limped over, voice hoarse. "Boss, we need to move. Police will be here in minutes."
Seo-jun nodded, lifting Adeyemi carefully.
They disappeared into the smoke like ghosts, leaving behind a cemetery of their own making. Seoul's underworld would remember this day, the day Seo-jun Kang burned an empire to ash. But only Seo-jun knew the truth. He'd won the war, and lost everything that mattered. Adeyemi survived. Barely. The private clinic Seo-jun used, the one that didn't ask questions or keep records, stabilized him by noon. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, trauma that would leave scars long after the bruises faded. But alive. In the operations room, Woo-suk laid out the aftermath like a coroner's report. "Baekho's finished," he said, exhaustion bleeding through his voice. "Changmin dead. 8 executives gone. Their entire command structure collapsed. We've already got 4 smaller factions fighting over the territory." Seo-jun stared at the map of Busan, now sectioned into color-coded zones of chaos. "How many? Casualties? 12 of ours. Maybe 60 of theirs." Woo-suk paused. "And 6 civilian contractors in the warehouse. Night shift security who—" "I know." Seo-jun's voice was flat. Silence filled the room like smoke. "Seoul's underworld is watching," Woo-suk continued carefully. "You've proven your power. No one will dare. They'll dare." Seo-jun turned from the map. "I didn't eliminate weakness. I created a vacuum. And vacuums get filled by hungrier predators. Then we consolidate. Take Baekho's routes, absorb there. And in 3 months, someone else takes Amara's children to prove they're brave enough to challenge me."
Seo-jun's jaw tightened.
"I didn't solve anything. I just reset the clock." The video call came at 2 p.m. Jiun appeared on screen, background sterile and white, her office probably, or somewhere equally devoid of humanity. "You've destabilized the entire southern corridor," she said without preamble. 6 factions are already moving on Busan. The government will have to intervene. And when they do, they'll need a symbol to prosecute. "What do you want, Jiun?" "Disappear." The word hung between them like a blade. "Hand me control of the routes," she continued, voice precise as contract law. "The political connections, the ledgers, everything. I'll consolidate under legitimate business structures. And you," she paused, "you become a ghost. And the children?" Jiun's expression didn't change. "If you're gone, they're irrelevant. No one hunts shadows of shadows." Seo-jun closed his eyes. "You're asking me to erase myself." "I'm offering you the only way they survive," Jiun corrected. "You burned Baekho to protect them, but you're still the target. Your name, your reputation, your existence. As long as Seo-jun Kang is alive and visible, they're vulnerable. And if I refuse, then you watch them die slowly while you fight an endless war you can't win." Her voice softened, almost human. "You've already lost, Seo-jun. You just haven't admitted it yet." The screen went dark. That night, Seo-jun sat in Amara's small apartment, the one he'd secured for her years ago in a neighborhood far from his empire's shadow. The children slept in the next room. He could hear their breathing, soft and innocent, unburdened by the violence that circled them like sharks. Amara sat across from him, hands wrapped around cold tea. "Adeyemi will recover," Seo-jun said quietly. I know. Baekho is destroyed. I know that too. Silence stretched between them. But it's not over, Amara said, reading the truth in his posture. Is it? Seo-jun shook his head. I created a power vacuum. Smaller factions are already fighting to fill it. And they'll use the children, to prove they're strong enough to challenge me. He met her eyes. I thought violence could solve this. But all I did was multiply the enemies. So what happens now? I disappear. Amara's breath caught. Completely, Seo-jun continued. Erase my name. Hand control to Jiun. Become no one. He looked toward the children's room. It's the only way they're safe. As long as I exist, I'm the weapon pointed at their hearts. And you? Amara asked, voice breaking. What happens to you? I'll still be alive, he answered. Just nowhere that matters. Amara reached across the table, touched his hand. That's not living. It's love, Seo-jun replied, the word foreign on his tongue. He stood slowly, memorizing the moment, her face, the sound of children breathing, the warmth of a home he'd never be part of. I leave tomorrow, he said. New identity, new country, ghost protocols Jiun's been preparing. Will I ever?
No.
The word came out harsher than intended. Contact means risk, and I won't risk them. Amara nodded, tears silent on her cheeks. Seo-jun walked to the door, paused. Tell them. He swallowed. Tell them I tried. At the airport the next morning, Seo-jun stood alone. One bag, one erased identity, one final severance from everything he'd built. He was boarding when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Seo-jun stared at the unknown number. Behind him, the boarding announcement echoed through Incheon International. Final call for Flight 247 to Sao Paulo, a city where Seo-jun Kang would cease to exist, where a man with a new name would live quietly, safely, irrelevantly. He answered. This is Madame Kang. Seo-jun went still. Jiun's mother. The woman who'd built a political dynasty through patience while men like Seo-jun built empires through blood. I'm listening, he said carefully. My daughter believes disappearance is power. Her voice was aged silk, smooth, strong, unbreakable. She thinks erasing yourself protects those you love. She's wrong. Then what would you suggest? Restraint. The word landed like a stone in still water. You showed restraint when you could have ruled through chaos, Madame Kang continued. You chose precision over brutality, structure over destruction. That's why you survived 20 years when louder men burned out in 5. Seo-jun watched passengers board the plane that would carry his ghost to another continent. Restraint didn't save Adeyemi. Violence did. Violence rescued Adeyemi, she corrected. But restraint is what kept him alive for 7 years before that. You could have used him carelessly, burned him like every other asset. Instead, you protected his family, hid them, gave them lives. She paused. That's not weakness, Seo-jun. That's a different kind of strength. It made them targets. Your visibility made them targets. Your love gave them a chance. Her tone sharpened. Jiun thinks power comes from elimination. Remove yourself, remove the problem. But power comes from control. And you've always understood control better than my daughter ever will. The final boarding call echoed. Seo-jun closed his eyes. What are you offering, Madame Kang? A third option. Her voice held certainty. You don't disappear. You don't parade them publicly. You remain quietly. Rule through structure, not chaos. Consolidate the underworld into something stable, predictable, controlled. And Amara? The children? You see them rarely, secretly, but truly. Silence stretched. You can't have everything, Seo-jun. But you don't need to lose it all. His breath caught. Jiun will never accept. Jiun answers to me, Madame Kang interrupted. And I've decided you're more valuable as a restrained king than a martyred ghost. Disappearance creates power vacuums. Presence, careful, controlled presence, creates stability. At what cost? Discipline. You become invisible except when necessary. No public ties.
No acknowledged relationships.
But in the shadows, in the moments no one sees, her voice softened. You get to be human. Seo-jun looked at his boarding pass. Flight 247, row 12A. A seat that would carry him to safety, anonymity, noble sacrifice. Everything he thought love demanded. Why? He asked quietly. Why would you help me? Because my daughter inherited her father's ruthlessness but not his wisdom, Madame Kang replied. She thinks love is liability. I know love, controlled, disciplined, restrained, is what separates kings from tyrants. The gate agent called final boarding. Seo-jun stood at the threshold. One path, disappear completely. Save them by erasing himself. Noble, clean, tragic. Another path, stay quietly, rule carefully, exist in margins and shadows. Imperfect, dangerous, human. Jiyun's voice echoed in his memory. You can't have everything. But Madame Kang offered something Jiyun never understood. Not everything. Not nothing. Something in between. The possibility that restraint could coexist with love. That power didn't require complete erasure. That being dangerous didn't mean being absent. Seo-jun thought of Zuri's laugh. Amara's quiet strength. Adeyemi's trust. The weight of being seen not as a king, but as a man. He thought of 20 years ruling through fear. And 6 hours discovering something worth more than an empire. The gate agent called his name. Final boarding. Last chance. Seo-jun looked at the jetway, at the escape route Jiyun had built for him. Then he turned off his phone. Walked away from the gate. Let the plane board without him. In the airport terminal, Seo-jun called Woo-suk. The deal with Jiyun is off, he said quietly. Contact Madame Kang. Tell her I'm accepting her terms. Boss. Confusion and relief mixed in Woo-suk's voice. You're staying.
I'm staying.
Seo-jun watched through the window as Flight 247 taxied toward the runway. But quietly, we restructure everything. No more wars. No more chaos. We become what Seoul's underworld needs. Predictable. Controlled. Invisible. And the family?
Seo-jun의 Stjålzeitend.
Rarely, secretly, but truly, he ended the call, watched his ghost fly away without him, and chose the harder path. Not disappearance, not exposure, something in between. Imperfect love over noble sacrifice. Restrained presence over tragic absence. The plane became a silver dot against the morning sky. Seo-jun turned away. He wasn't clean, wasn't a hero, wasn't free. But he was staying, and somehow that mattered most. 5 years passed like breath held underwater. Seoul's underworld stabilized under Seo-jun's invisible hand. No more wars, no public displays, just structure, predictable, controlled, boring enough that ambitious men looked elsewhere for glory. Jiyun consolidated political power, her father's consortium expanding into legitimate industries while Seo-jun's networks operated beneath, silent as foundation stones. Madame Kang had been right. Restraint was its own kind of power, and Seo-jun became a ghost who still cast shadows. The school auditorium was small, unremarkable, the kind of place important people never noticed. Seo-jun sat in the back row, baseball cap pulled low, just another anonymous parent among dozens. He'd arrived late, would leave early, existed in the margins like he'd learned to do. On stage, Zuri stood under spotlight. 12 years old now, tall, confident, her mother's grace, her father's strength. She recited poetry in fluent Korean and Yoruba, voice carrying through the auditorium like music, words about home, belonging, the spaces between cultures where identity lived.
Seo-jun의 Stjålzeitend.
He'd missed her first steps, her first day of school. Birthdays, holidays, the thousand small moments that built childhood. But he was here for this. Quietly, secretly, truly. Zuri finished to applause, bowed, smiled with the unself-conscious joy of someone who'd never learned to be afraid. Seo-jun felt something crack behind his ribs. This was what restraint purchased. Not his presence in her life, her safety to live one. As families filed out, Amara glanced back. Their eyes met across the crowded auditorium. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just a small nod. Acknowledgement. I see you. Thank you. Now go. Seo-jun nodded back, stood, disappeared into the evening crowd before anyone could notice him. Outside, Seoul streets buzzed with evening traffic, neon signs. The ordinary chaos of a city that had forgotten the war fought in its shadows 5 years ago. Seo-jun walked alone, hands in pockets, just another man heading home to a life no one would remember. Adeyemi had recovered fully, returned to work. Different work now, legitimate consulting, no more dancing in shadows. They'd spoken twice in 5 years. Careful conversations, necessary distance. The children were safe, thriving. Everything Seo-jun's disappearance was supposed to achieve. Except he hadn't disappeared. He'd chosen something harder. That night, Seo-jun stood on his penthouse balcony, the same one where Amara had challenged him 5 years ago, and looked out at the city he still ruled from the shadows. He wasn't forgiven. 20 years of violence didn't wash away with one noble choice. Jin's family still mourned. The warehouse workers who died had names, children, futures erased by Seo-jun's war. He wasn't clean. Blood stained his hands permanently, invisible ink that no amount of restraint could bleach away. He wasn't a hero. Zuri would never call him father. The children would grow up knowing only fragments of his existence. A shadow who helped once, disappeared wisely. But he'd chosen restraint over revenge. Chosen structure over chaos. Chosen the possibility of love over the certainty of power. And in doing so, discovered something his father never taught him. True power wasn't domination. It wasn't fear or territory or the ability to eliminate threats. True power was choosing who got to live unburdened by your darkness. It was standing in the back of an auditorium, unseen and unacknowledged, watching a child recite poetry because you'd made enough space for her to be safe. It was knowing you'd never be thanked, never be recognized, never be loved the way you secretly wished, and choosing it anyway. Seo-jun's phone buzzed. A photo from Woo-suk. No message needed. Zuri on stage, spotlight bright, smiling. Seo-jun saved it to a folder he'd never show anyone. Evidence of a life he protected from a distance. Proof that monsters could choose restraint. That love didn't always look like presence. Sometimes it looked like carefully measured absence. Years later, when historians would write about Seoul's transformation from violent underworld chaos to structured criminal enterprise, they'd credit economic factors, political pressure, generational change. They'd never mention Seo-jun Kang, the king who chose to become invisible, the man who discovered that the hardest battles weren't fought with explosives and assault teams, but with the daily discipline of staying away from people you loved, who learned that sometimes protection meant not being the hero, just being the shadow that kept darker shadows at bay. In the quiet moments the world never saw, in back rows of auditoriums, in encrypted photos saved to private folders, in the careful architecture of a life built around absence, that choice mattered. Not loudly, not publicly, but truly. And for Seo-jun Kang, that had to be enough. If you enjoyed the story this far, don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next chapter and enjoy more story from us. And if this story gave you chills, drop a like and share it with someone who loves powerful romance with a dangerous edge. Your support keeps these stories coming. Thank you.